Listen closely, my friends. There is a prison so silent that most people spend their entire lives inside it without ever realizing they were captured. It has no walls to touch, no chains to break, and no guards standing at its gates. Instead, it is built from forgotten insults, old betrayals, desperate expectations, and the exhausting need to be understood by people who never intended to understand you. Day after day, it steals something far more valuable than money. It steals your peace. Somewhere, at this very moment, a person who once wounded you has already moved on with their life. They are laughing with friends, making plans for tomorrow, and sleeping peacefully tonight, while your mind continues replaying a conversation that ended months or even years ago. The greatest tragedy is not what they did to you. The greatest tragedy is that they no longer need to control your life, because your own thoughts have continued doing that job for them. Marcus Aurelius once ruled an empire stretching across continents. Yet even with limitless power, he knew there was one kingdom more difficult to govern than Rome itself. It was the kingdom inside his own mind. Every sunrise brought criticism, betrayal, jealousy, manipulation, and hatred. But he discovered a truth that separated ordinary men from extraordinary ones. No person can disturb a peaceful mind unless that mind quietly opens the door and invites them inside. Think carefully about your own life. How many nights have you sacrificed because of someone's opinion? How many mornings have been ruined by a single message, a single rejection, or a single memory? How much of your future has been quietly handed over to people who are no longer even thinking about you? The Stoics believed this was the greatest form of slavery, because invisible chains are always stronger than visible ones. Today, everything changes. In this journey, you will discover 10 timeless Stoic lessons that have survived wars, fallen empires, and thousands of years of human history. These lessons are not designed to make you emotionless. They are designed to make you untouchable. By the end of this video, you will understand why silence can be louder than revenge, why indifference can become your greatest strength, and why the people who master themselves never need to fight for anyone's approval. So stay with me until the very end, because the final lesson is the one that transforms a peaceful man into an unbreakable one. Lesson 1. Guard the gates of your mind. Every great civilization understood one timeless truth. A kingdom does not fall the day an enemy arrives at its walls. It falls the day the gates are carelessly left open. The battle is always decided long before the swords are drawn. Your mind is no different. Every insult you replay before sleeping, every opinion you carry into tomorrow, and every person you allow to live rent-free inside your thoughts is another gate left unguarded. The greatest invasions never begin outside you. They begin with a single thought you refuse to let go. Imagine a magnificent Roman fortress standing on the edge of an empire. Thousands of soldiers guard its walls, yet the commander fears only one thing: not the size of the enemy's army, but the possibility that someone inside will quietly unlock the gates before sunrise. That is exactly how peace is destroyed. No stranger has the power to enter your inner world unless your own mind opens the door first. Every unnecessary reaction is an invitation. Every emotional outburst is permission. Every desperate attempt to defend your reputation is another key handed to someone who never deserved it. Marcus Aurelius understood this better than anyone alive. As emperor, he woke each morning knowing he would face betrayal, criticism, jealousy, and manipulation. Yet before he prepared his armies, he prepared his mind. He reminded himself that people could attack his reputation, challenge his authority, or question his wisdom, but none of them could touch his character unless he willingly surrendered it. His greatest victory was never over rebellious nations. It was over the impulses within himself that begged him to react. Most people believe peace is something the world gives them. The Stoics believed peace is something the world constantly tries to take away. Every headline fights for your attention. Every argument demands your energy. Every insult asks for your reaction. Slowly, without realizing it, people spend their entire lives defending themselves against voices that will be forgotten within a few years. They become exhausted, not because life is heavy, but because they are carrying burdens that never belonged to them in the first place. Look carefully at the ocean during a violent storm. The surface crashes with enormous waves, roaring as though the entire sea has lost its mind. But thousands of feet below, the water remains perfectly still. The deeper the ocean, the less it is disturbed by the chaos above. Your mind was meant to become like those depths. Shallow people react to every opinion because they live on the surface. Wise people cultivate such depth within themselves that the noise of the world never reaches the foundation of who they are. Epictetus taught that no one can insult your true self, because your true self does not exist inside another person's mouth. It exists inside your own choices. The moment you understand this, something extraordinary begins to happen. You stop chasing respect because your character begins creating it naturally. You stop explaining yourself because truth has no urgency. You stop fearing criticism because you finally understand that another person's judgment is only a reflection of their own mind, never a measurement of yours. Before you continue to the next lesson, ask yourself one question and answer it without lying to yourself. Who has been living inside your mind for months, perhaps even years, without ever asking your permission? The day you finally close that gate is the day you stop becoming a prisoner of other people and begin becoming the guardian of your own peace. Lesson 2. Stop feeding the fire that wants to consume you. Imagine standing before a raging fire while carrying a bucket filled with oil instead of water. Every word you speak in anger, every desperate attempt to defend yourself, and every argument you refuse to leave behind becomes another splash of fuel thrown onto the flames. Most people believe they are fighting back, but in reality, they are only making the fire stronger. This is why so many conflicts never truly end. They survive because someone keeps feeding them. The Stoics understood a truth that feels almost impossible in today's world. Not every battle deserves your strength. Some victories cost so much peace that they become defeats disguised as success. Every minute spent trying to convince someone determined to misunderstand you is a minute stolen from the life you were meant to build. Your attention is a priceless currency, and the world is filled with people willing to waste it if you allow them. Epictetus once taught that if someone insults you, they are speaking only to the version of you that exists inside their own mind. They are not describing your true character. They are revealing their own judgment, their own fears, and their own limitations. The moment you understand this, something extraordinary begins to happen. Their words lose their weight because you finally realize they were never carrying the truth in the first place. Look closely at the strongest people you have ever admired. They are rarely the loudest voices in the room. They do not rush to defend every accusation or answer every insult. They understand that storms eventually exhaust themselves when the mountains refuse to move. Silence is not weakness. Silence is often the highest form of confidence because it proves you no longer need another person's approval to recognize your own worth. As you move into the next lesson, ask yourself one question that may change the direction of your entire life. How many fires are still burning today simply because you refuse to stop feeding them? Sometimes the greatest act of strength is not winning the argument. Sometimes it is walking away before the argument ever becomes your prison. Lesson 3. The power of becoming unreachable. There comes a moment in every man's life when he must answer a question that no one else can answer for him. Will you spend your years chasing the approval of people who cannot even govern their own minds? Or will you finally become the kind of man whose peace is no longer for sale? Most people never ask this question. They simply wake up each morning and continue auctioning their emotions to the highest bidder, allowing every opinion, every rejection, and every careless word to determine how they feel about themselves. The Stoics understood something that modern society has almost completely forgotten. The person who controls your emotions becomes the invisible ruler of your life. They do not need chains, threats, or weapons. They only need your reaction. The moment they can predict your anger, your fear, or your desperation, they already know how to move you like a chess piece across the board. A man who cannot control himself will always become someone else's weapon. Imagine a vast mountain standing beneath a sky filled with violent storms. Thunder crashes against its cliffs, lightning tears across the darkness, and freezing rain falls without mercy. Yet when the storm finally passes, the mountain has not moved even a single inch. The storm believed it was powerful because it was loud. The mountain was powerful because it never needed to answer. This is the difference between temporary force and permanent strength. Noise demands attention. Strength remains silent. Marcus Aurelius wrote that your mind will take the shape of whatever you repeatedly allow inside it. Every insult you replay becomes another stone added to the prison you live in. Every betrayal you refuse to release becomes another chain wrapped around your own heart. Your greatest enemy is rarely the person who hurt you once. Your greatest enemy is the version of yourself that continues reliving the wound long after the battle has ended. That is how suffering survives. Not because life keeps attacking you, but because memory refuses to let go. From this day forward, stop asking whether people understand you. Ask whether they deserve access to your inner world. Not everyone who speaks to you deserves your attention. Not everyone who criticizes you deserves your explanation. And not everyone who walks into your life deserves a permanent seat inside your mind. Peace is not found by convincing the world to treat you better. Peace begins the moment you become impossible to manipulate, because your self-worth no longer depends on another person's opinion. Lesson 4. Die before your body dies. The ancient Stoics practiced a discipline that terrified ordinary people because it forced them to face the one truth everyone spends their lives trying to escape. Every morning, before they made a single decision, they remembered that one day their name would be spoken for the last time. Their footsteps would disappear, their voice would fall silent, and the world would continue turning without asking where they had gone. This was never meant to create fear. It was meant to destroy every fear that wasn't worth carrying. Imagine standing in an abandoned palace where the statues of forgotten kings still rise from the stone. There was a time when armies trembled at the sound of their names. Nations fought to earn their approval, and countless people believed their power would last forever. Today, dust rests upon their crowns, silence fills their halls, and the world walks past them without remembering the battles they once believed were everything. Time does not negotiate with emperors. It simply keeps moving. Now ask yourself a question that almost no one has the courage to answer. If your life ended 1 year from today, would the opinion that keeps you awake tonight still matter? Would that argument still deserve your energy? Would that rejection still feel powerful? Suddenly, the insults that once felt like mountains become grains of sand. Death has a strange way of exposing what truly matters. It strips away illusion until only truth remains. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that every person who praised him would eventually die, and every person who criticized him would disappear as well. Their judgments were temporary because they themselves were temporary. The only thing worthy of his attention was the character he carried within. He understood that reputation belongs to the crowd, but integrity belongs to the soul. One can be taken away overnight. The other survives every storm. Most people waste their lives trying to leave an impression on strangers while quietly abandoning the person they see in the mirror each morning. They chase applause that fades within minutes and fear criticism that will be forgotten within days. They build their identity on voices that change with the wind, never realizing that a man who depends on applause will eventually become a prisoner of silence. So before you continue to the next lesson, picture your own life from its final day. Imagine looking back on every hour you spent proving yourself to people who never truly cared. Then ask yourself the question that changed the lives of the greatest Stoic minds in history. If everything outside of you disappears in the end, why are you sacrificing your inner peace for things that were never meant to last? Lesson 5. Let them lose you. One of the greatest illusions ever sold to mankind is the belief that everyone deserves access to your heart. From childhood, you are taught to be available, to explain yourself, to forgive endlessly, and to keep proving your worth even to people who have already decided they will never see your value. But nature has never worked that way. The sun does not rise to convince the blind that light exists. The ocean does not chase the thirsty, and the mountain never lowers itself so that everyone can reach its summit. The strongest things in existence never beg to be appreciated. They simply exist. A lion never turns around because a flock of birds is screaming above his head. He keeps walking because he understands something the birds never will. Noise is not power. Attention is. The moment you stop reacting to every criticism, every insult, and every act of disrespect, something unexpected begins to happen. The people who once believed they controlled your emotions suddenly discover that they have lost access to you, and nothing confuses a manipulator more than a person who can no longer be manipulated. Seneca warned that the greatest waste of life is giving your time to those who treat it as if it were worthless. Think about how many years disappear because people are afraid of losing someone who never feared losing them. They send one more message, offer one more explanation, accept one more humiliation, hoping that love, respect, or loyalty can be earned through sacrifice. But the harder they chase, the smaller they become. Respect has never been born from desperation. It has always been born from quiet dignity. There comes a day when every strong soul must make a painful decision. You must stop mourning the people who walked away from your life and start mourning the version of yourself that disappeared while trying to keep them. Perhaps your greatest loss was never another person. Perhaps your greatest loss was your own peace, your confidence, and your identity. The moment you recover those, you realize that some people were never taken from you. They were removed to make room for the person you were always meant to become. Marcus Aurelius understood that life constantly removes what does not belong to us. Seasons leave, empires fall, friends change, loved ones disappear, even our own bodies grow old. Nothing outside of us was ever promised to stay. The only thing we are truly responsible for is the condition of our own character. The person who learns this stops clinging to what is temporary and begins building what time itself cannot destroy. So when someone chooses to walk away, let them. When someone refuses to see your worth, let them. When someone mistakes your silence for weakness, let them. You are not losing the right people. They are losing the opportunity to walk beside a version of you that only a few will ever deserve to know. One day they may realize your value, but by then your peace will be far too expensive for them to afford. Lesson 6. The day you stop needing to be understood. There is a moment in every person's life when they realize a painful truth. No matter how honest you are, someone will call you a liar. No matter how kind you become, someone will accuse you of cruelty. No matter how much you sacrifice, someone will still believe you never gave enough. This is not because you failed to explain yourself. It is because people do not see you through the eyes of truth. They see you through the wounds they have never healed, the fears they have never faced, and the stories they have already decided to believe. Imagine standing before a perfectly still lake beneath a moonlit sky. The water reflects everything with flawless clarity until someone throws a single stone into its surface. The reflection disappears, not because the moon has changed, but because the water has. Human perception works the same way. When a person's mind is disturbed by envy, pride, insecurity, or resentment, they cannot see you as you truly are. They only see the distorted reflection created by the storms inside themselves. And yet most people spend their entire lives trying to straighten a reflection that was never theirs to control. Epictetus warned that if you make it your mission to control what exists in another person's mind, you have already abandoned control over your own. Think about how exhausting that battle becomes. You explain yourself once, then again, then a third time, believing that the next sentence will finally change their opinion. But every explanation becomes another chain wrapped around your freedom. The desperate need to be understood is often nothing more than the fear of being misunderstood. And fear has never been a foundation for peace. The strongest souls in history shared one quiet habit. They allowed misunderstanding to exist without allowing it to define them. Marcus Aurelius was criticized while ruling an empire. Seneca was hated for his wisdom. Even the greatest minds were judged by people who lacked the ability to recognize greatness. They did not waste their lives chasing every false accusation because they understood that truth does not become stronger when defended, and lies do not become truth simply because they are repeated by a crowd. One day you will discover a freedom so profound that it will feel almost unfamiliar. It is the day you stop measuring your worth by the opinions of people who have never carried your burdens, never fought your battles, and never walked through your darkest nights. On that day, your silence will no longer be an act of surrender. It will become evidence that your identity is rooted so deeply within your character that no misunderstanding can shake it. The world may continue writing stories about who you are, but your soul will no longer feel obligated to read them. Lesson 7. The world is testing the man you pretend to be. Every sunrise asks you a question, but it never speaks the words aloud. It watches the way you react when someone disrespects you. It watches the anger that rises when life becomes unfair. It watches the fear that appears when everything you built begins to fall apart. Then, in complete silence, life gives you a score. Not based on what you say you believe, but based on who you become when your comfort is taken away. Character is never revealed in peaceful moments. It is exposed the instant the storm arrives. Imagine an ancient blacksmith standing before a furnace so hot that the air itself begins to tremble. He never places worthless metal into the fire because there is no reason to waste the flame. Only the strongest steel is heated until it glows, hammered until it cracks, and folded again and again until every hidden weakness disappears. The steel never understands why it must suffer. It only knows the pain, but when the process is complete, it becomes a sword that generations will remember. In exactly the same way, life never tests you because it hates you. It tests you because weakness can never become strength without first passing through the fire. Marcus Aurelius never asked the gods to remove hardship from his path. Instead, he asked for the wisdom to remain himself while walking through it. He understood that every insult was an examination of his patience, every betrayal was an examination of his integrity, and every loss was an examination of his attachment. The event itself was never the real challenge. The real challenge was deciding whether he would surrender his character to something that existed for only a moment. Most people fail this examination before they even realize it has begun. One insult steals their kindness. One disappointment steals their hope. One betrayal steals their ability to trust. Slowly, without noticing, they allow the world to rewrite who they are. They become cold because someone else was cruel. They become dishonest because someone else lied. They become bitter because life became difficult. In trying to punish the world, they unknowingly destroy the very soul they were trying to protect. This is the greatest victory your enemies could ever hope for, not that they hurt you once, but that they changed the person you were meant to become. The Stoics believed that every painful experience carries two invisible gifts. The first is the event itself. The second is the opportunity to discover who you truly are. Most people spend their lives staring at the wound, asking, "Why did this happen to me?" The wise ask a far more powerful question: who is this pain asking me to become? That single question transforms suffering from a prison into a path. It turns loss into wisdom, rejection into freedom, and hardship into the birthplace of an unshakable mind. Lesson 8. The man you must kill before you can be free. There is an enemy that has followed you since the day you were born. It knows every fear you hide, every regret you refuse to release, and every dream you abandoned because you doubted yourself. It has watched every failure, whispered through every disappointment, and quietly convinced you that becoming extraordinary is meant for someone else. The tragedy is that this enemy has never lived outside you. It has always spoken with your own voice. Most people spend their entire lives preparing for battles that never arrive, while ignoring the war taking place inside their own minds. They blame society, bad luck, betrayal, and difficult circumstances for the life they live. But the Stoics believed that no prison is more dangerous than the one built by your own thoughts. Long before another person defeats you, you first surrender to the belief that you are not strong enough to rise again. The greatest defeat is never losing to the world. It is losing faith in yourself before the world has even tested you. Imagine an ancient warrior walking into battle wearing armor that has already been cracked from the inside. From a distance he appears fearless. His sword is sharp, his shield is polished, and his footsteps never hesitate. But the first blow shatters him because the damage was never caused by the enemy. It was hidden beneath the armor long before the battle began. This is how millions of people live. They spend years strengthening their image while neglecting their spirit, protecting their reputation while abandoning their character, and chasing success while slowly losing themselves. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. If your mind is filled with fear, you begin to see danger where none exists. If it is filled with resentment, every stranger becomes an enemy. If it is filled with insecurity, no amount of praise will ever feel enough. Your inner world silently becomes the architect of your outer life. Every decision, every relationship, and every future begins with the conversations you have when no one else is listening. There comes a moment when every strong man must perform the hardest act of courage imaginable. He must bury the version of himself that is addicted to excuses, dependent on approval, and terrified of failure. Not because that version deserves hatred, but because it can never carry him into the life he was created to live. The old self must die so the disciplined self can be born. This is why the Stoics spoke of self-mastery before they ever spoke of conquering the world. A man who cannot conquer himself will eventually be conquered by everything around him. Lesson 9. Become the man that even pain cannot control. There comes a level of strength that very few human beings ever reach. It is the moment when life realizes it can no longer negotiate with your soul. It sends failure, yet you remain disciplined. It sends betrayal, yet you remain honorable. It sends loneliness, yet you remain complete. It sends humiliation, yet your dignity never leaves your side. This is the level where suffering stops being your enemy and begins becoming the architect of your greatness. Most people spend their lives praying for an easier road. The Stoics prayed for stronger shoulders. Imagine an ancient oak standing alone on the edge of a cliff, where every winter arrives with merciless winds. Smaller trees snap in half, their branches scattered across the frozen ground, but the oak remains standing year after year. Not because the storm showed mercy, but because every storm forced its roots to grow deeper into the earth. Nature has always whispered the same truth to those willing to listen. Comfort creates fragile lives. Resistance creates unshakable foundations. The greatest souls are not protected from the storm. They are created by it. Seneca wrote that fire tests gold, while adversity tests great character. Most people hear those words and admire them, but very few choose to live them. The instant pain enters their lives, they begin asking, "Why me?" They curse the darkness, blame fate, and surrender their peace to circumstances they cannot control. The Stoic asks a different question. What part of me is this pain trying to strengthen? That single question transforms every hardship into a teacher. Suddenly, rejection becomes discipline, loneliness becomes self-discovery, failure becomes wisdom, and loss becomes the beginning of freedom. One day you will discover that the world has been watching you more closely than you ever realized. Your family watches how you respond to disappointment. Your children, whether they are born yet or not, will inherit the habits you practice today. Even strangers silently study the way you carry yourself through suffering. Every reaction becomes a lesson that someone else learns from your life. This is why character is never private. The way you endure pain echoes through people you may never even meet. Marcus Aurelius understood that every difficult moment presented him with two identities. One identity begged for comfort, searched for excuses, and demanded that life become fair. The other stood silently beside him, waiting for the opportunity to become wiser, calmer, and stronger than the man who existed yesterday. Every hardship asked the same question. Which version of yourself will survive this moment? Your destiny has never been written by your circumstances. It has always been written by the identity you choose when circumstances become unbearable. Lesson 10. Live so well that time cannot erase you. Every human being dies twice. The first death comes when the heart beats for the final time. The second arrives much later, when the last trace of your character disappears from the minds of those whose lives you touched. Most people fear the first death because it ends their existence. The Stoics feared the second because it reveals they lived without purpose. A long life means nothing if it was spent chasing approval instead of building a soul worthy of remembrance. Walk with me through the ruins of ancient Rome. The marble palaces have cracked, the golden crowns have turned to dust, and the voices that once commanded entire nations have vanished into silence. Countless emperors believed their power would last forever, yet history remembers only a handful of names, not because they possessed more wealth or greater armies, but because their character proved stronger than the passing of time. Empires collapse, monuments decay, and kingdoms disappear, but wisdom has a strange way of surviving every civilization that tries to bury it. Marcus Aurelius knew that one day even his empire would become a memory. He could not control whether people praised him or condemned him after his death. He could not force history to speak kindly of his name. The only thing within his control was the person he chose to become before the sun disappeared each evening. That is why he never measured success by applause, status, or comfort. He measured it by one silent question. Did I leave my soul stronger than I found it this morning? Every day became an opportunity to carve another layer of discipline into his character, knowing that greatness is never created in one extraordinary moment, but in thousands of ordinary choices made correctly. One day your wealth will belong to someone else. Your possessions will gather dust. Your photographs will slowly fade, and the people who once spoke your name every day will eventually speak it for the last time. This is not a reason to fear life. It is the reason to stop wasting it. The opinion that keeps you awake tonight will disappear. The argument you believed was so important will be forgotten. The people you exhausted yourself trying to impress will continue living their own lives. In the end, only one question will remain. Who did you become while time quietly carried everything else away? This is the final secret the Stoics left behind. The purpose of life was never to defeat every enemy, collect every victory, or convince the world of your value. The purpose was to become the kind of human being that no amount of suffering could corrupt, no amount of praise could intoxicate, and no amount of hatred could poison. When your character becomes stronger than your circumstances, the world loses its power to define you. That is true freedom. That is true wealth. That is the only victory that death itself cannot steal. So as this journey comes to an end, I want you to carry one final thought into the silence that follows. Years from now, when your story has reached its final page and your footsteps have faded from the earth, the world will not remember how many arguments you won or how many people approved of you. It will remember the strength you showed when life became unbearable, the peace you carried when others chose chaos, and the light you left behind in a world that desperately needed it. Master your mind, protect your character, and let time become the witness that you truly lived, not merely existed. If you have stayed with me until this moment, then something inside you has already begun to change, not because you heard new words, but because somewhere deep within you, an old illusion has finally started to break. The illusion that peace comes from changing other people, the illusion that happiness comes from winning every argument, the illusion that your worth depends on how loudly the world applauds your existence. Those illusions have stolen enough of your life. You do not need them anymore. From this day forward, people will still misunderstand you. Some will doubt you, others will leave you, and a few will try to provoke you simply because they cannot control themselves. But now you know something they do not. Your mind is no longer a place where every stranger is welcome. Your peace is no longer something that can be purchased with praise or stolen with criticism. The greatest victory was never over another person. It was over the version of yourself that once believed every opinion deserved a response. Years from now, you will not remember every insult that was thrown at you. You will not remember every argument you refused to join or every person who chose to walk away. But you will remember the day you stopped abandoning yourself just to keep others comfortable. You will remember the moment you chose discipline over emotion, wisdom over revenge, silence over noise, and character over approval. That single decision will quietly shape every chapter of the life that follows. Marcus Aurelius once reminded himself that each morning he could choose between becoming a prisoner of the world or becoming the master of his own mind. The same choice now belongs to you. Every sunrise will ask the same silent question: will you give your peace away, or will you protect it? No one else can answer that question. Not your family, not your enemies, not your past, and not your future. Only you. So when this video ends and the silence returns, do not rush back into the noise. Sit with these lessons for a moment. Let them settle into your heart. Let them challenge the habits that have kept you weak. And when life tests you again, and it will, remember that storms do not ask permission before they arrive, but neither does the mountain before it stands. If these Stoic lessons awakened something inside you, write one word in the comments: unbreakable. Not to impress anyone else, but as a promise to yourself that from this day forward you will protect your peace more fiercely than your pride, your character more carefully than your reputation, and your purpose more faithfully than your comfort. Because in the end, the strongest person is not the one who conquered the world. The strongest person is the one who conquered himself, and that person can never truly be defeated.